22 degrees inside. -15 outside. No gas. No electricity. No heating of any kind. Just 6 techniques that most people have never heard of. But here's what surprises most people. The first technique has nothing to do with blankets. Nothing to do with fire. Nothing to do with anything above the ground. Across displacement camps from northern Syria to eastern Ukraine, over 3 million people face winter without conventional heating. Temperatures drop below -20. Winds cut through fabric walls. The ground freezes solid for months. And yet, families survive. Not by waiting for help. By learning what works and passing it on, tent by tent, night by night. Some of these methods are now studied by engineers. Others are included in official survival guides. And a few of them, you could use the next time your heating fails. This is how they stay warm when nothing around them is designed to keep them warm. The ground is the first enemy. Most people do not realize this. Cold air is dangerous, but soil is worse. The earth conducts heat away from the body at a rate 25 times faster than still air. Lie directly on frozen ground, and warmth leaves the body in minutes. No blanket on top can replace what is lost below. This is physics. And physics does not negotiate. Experienced families understood this within days of arriving. Cardboard from aid shipments. Plastic sheeting from packaging. Foam. Wooden pallets when available. Anything that separates the body from the frozen earth. Layer by layer, they build a barrier beneath their sleeping area. 3 centimeters of cardboard alone reduces ground heat loss by nearly 40%. Add a layer of plastic, and moisture transfer stops as well. The ground becomes neutral. It stops pulling warmth away through the night. One family in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley documented their system. 7 layers. Pallet wood at the bottom. Then cardboard. Plastic sheeting. A wool blanket. More cardboard. A foam mat. Then their sleeping blankets on top. The surface they slept on measured 11 degrees warmer than the bare ground beside it. No fire. No fuel. No cost. Just separation from the earth. But insulation from below solves only half the problem. What happens above is where most instincts fail. The natural response to cold is accumulation. More blankets. More layers. More weight pressed against the body. But there is a limit, and it has nothing to do with quantity. Blankets work by trapping air. Still air is a poor conductor of heat. Each layer creates a pocket, and each pocket slows the escape of warmth from the body. But compress those layers too tightly, and the air pockets collapse. The fabric becomes dense. Insulation disappears. 10 blankets pressed flat can perform worse than 4 blankets loosely arranged. Families learn to create loft. Blankets are shaken out before laying. Edges are not tucked too tight. Some use plastic bottles or rolled clothing to create intentional gaps between layers. The goal is not weight. The goal is architecture. Air trapped in layers. That is what keeps warmth from escaping. This principle extends to clothing as well. You might assume the warmest sleepers wear the most layers. They do not. They wear the right layers. A base layer that pulls moisture away from the skin. A middle layer that traps air. An outer layer that blocks wind and dampness from entering. 3 layers, correctly chosen, outperform 6 layers piled without thought. And there's one thing experienced families never do. They never sleep with their heads fully covered by blankets. Carbon dioxide builds up. Moisture from breath saturates the fabric. By morning, the space around the face is damp and cold. Worse than if it had been left open. Instead, they cover everything except a small breathing space. And they position that space away from the tent walls, where condensation collects and freezes overnight. Small details. But in freezing conditions, small details become the difference between rest and exhaustion. Now, individual technique only reaches so far. The real efficiency comes from something more fundamental. Something older than any survival manual. Body heat is the only reliable source of warmth inside these tents. An adult human generates roughly 80 to 100 watts of thermal energy. Constantly. A child generates less, but still contributes. The question is not how to create more heat. Without fuel, that is impossible. The question is how to prevent heat from leaving. Families sleep in formation. Not scattered across the tent floor. Clustered together. Children placed in the center. Adults on the perimeter. The smallest bodies, which lose heat fastest, are surrounded by larger thermal masses. The edges of the group, where cold air meets warm, are occupied by those who can tolerate greater temperature variation. This is not cultural tradition. It is thermodynamics. A cluster of 5 people sharing blankets loses heat at roughly half the rate of 5 individuals sleeping separately with the same materials. Surface area decreases. Shared warmth circulates within the group. The cluster becomes a single thermal unit. Parents do not need to understand the physics. They understand the result. Children wake up warm. That is enough. If you are finding value in these techniques, whether for emergency preparedness or simply understanding how survival works at the edges, consider subscribing. We document methods that rarely appear in conventional guides. Now, the next technique is one that aid organizations initially resisted. Until they measured the results. Standard emergency tents have single walls. That wall separates inside from outside, but the temperature difference across that thin membrane is extreme. Condensation forms on the interior surface. Cold radiates inward. The wall itself becomes a cooling element. Families discovered something simple. Hanging a second layer inside the tent, even a thin plastic sheet, transforms the thermal dynamics completely. The gap between layers traps dead air. That air acts as insulation. The inner surface no longer contacts freezing fabric directly. Temperature stabilizes. Measurements show differences of 8 to 12 degrees between single-wall and double-wall configurations. Same tent. Same materials. Just one additional layer with space between. Some families use the plastic wrapping from aid packages. Others use emergency blankets, the reflective silver sheets designed to retain body heat. When positioned with the reflective surface facing inward, these sheets bounce radiant heat back toward the living space. Cheap. Lightweight. Available in almost any camp. And remarkably effective. This method is now recommended in several NGO winter guidelines. What families discovered through necessity, engineers later confirmed through measurement. Everything so far assumes static conditions. Night falls. Temperature drops. Families endure until morning. The same pattern, repeated. But the cleverest adaptation involves time itself. Water has high thermal mass. It absorbs heat slowly and releases it slowly. During the day, when winter sun warms the tent interior even slightly, dark containers filled with water absorb that warmth. Plastic bottles painted black or wrapped in dark fabric work best. Families position these bottles along the south-facing side of the tent during daylight hours. By evening, the water temperature inside can reach 15 to 20 degrees, even when outside air hovers near freezing. Before sleeping, they move these bottles inside the sleeping area. Tucked against bodies. Placed at the foot of blankets. Positioned near children, who lose heat fastest. The water releases stored warmth gradually through the night. A 2-liter bottle can provide measurable heat for 4 to 5 hours. 8 bottles distributed through a family sleeping area create a thermal reservoir that smooths the temperature curve from dusk until dawn. No fuel burned. No electricity used. Just sunlight captured during the day and released when it matters most. This technique costs nothing. It requires only water and containers. And it turns the sun into a delayed heating system. But perhaps the most overlooked factor is one that seems minor. Until you experience the difference yourself. Air movement. Even tiny drafts carry heat away from the body through convection. A gap under the tent edge. A loose entrance flap. A small tear in the fabric. These openings do not let much cold air in. What they do is let warm air out. Warm air rises. It is lighter than cold air. And it escapes through any available opening, constantly replaced by heavier cold air from below. Families seal obsessively. Stones and soil piled against exterior edges. Fabric stuffed into gaps. Entrance flaps layered and weighted with whatever is available. The goal is not airtight conditions, which would create dangerous carbon dioxide buildup. The goal is controlled air exchange. Enough fresh air to breathe safely. Little enough movement to preserve warmth. One study of tent conditions in northern Iraq found that draft-proofing alone, without any additional insulation or materials, raised interior nighttime temperatures by an average of 4 degrees Celsius. When combined with ground insulation, proper layering, body clustering, and double walls, the cumulative effect approached 15 degrees of difference between inside and outside. 15 degrees is not comfort. But 15 degrees is survival. Here is what emerges when these 6 techniques are taken together. Warmth, in the absence of heating, is not about adding heat. There is no way to add heat without fuel. It is about preventing loss. Ground insulation stops conductive loss. Proper layering stops radiative loss. Body clustering reduces exposed surface area. Double walls create insulating air gaps. Thermal mass stores and releases solar energy. Draft control prevents convective loss. Each technique alone provides marginal improvement. Together, they create conditions where families can sleep through nights that would otherwise be dangerous. Not comfortable. Not easy. But survivable. And survival, repeated night after night, becomes something else. It becomes knowledge. The techniques spread without formal instruction. A family sees their neighbors collecting cardboard and asks why. A mother notices bottles lining another tent's southern wall. A child explains the sleeping formation to cousins in the next row. Within one winter season, methods that started with a few families become practices across the entire camp. No training programs. No manuals distributed. Just observation, imitation, and refinement. This is adaptation at its most human. Not waiting for solutions to arrive. Building them from available materials and shared experience. The physics does not change between a displacement camp and a blackout in your own city. The principles that keep a family alive at -20 can keep you warm when your furnace fails. Ground insulation. Air pockets. Shared body heat. Reduced drafts. Stored thermal mass. These are not refugee techniques. They are survival techniques. Universal and ancient. Rediscovered by necessity in places where modern systems do not reach. Winter in these camps is not an event that passes. It is a condition that must be endured, night after night, for months. The cold does not grow tired. It does not ease on its own. But neither do the people facing it. In the comments, tell us which technique surprised you most. Until then.